On April 15, 1912, as the Titanic slipped into the black frozen Atlantic, more than 1,000 lives vanished beneath the surface. Among them was Thomas Andrews, the man who helped design the ship, a man who knew before anyone else that she was doomed. Witnesses said he walked the decks calmly, helping others, refusing a lifeboat. But what history never explained was why Andrews stood alone at the end, staring at the water, as if waiting for something. Because the truth was this: Thomas Andrews had already drowned once before. 14 years earlier, in the shipyards of Belfast, a boy who could not swim jumped into freezing water and saved his life. That boy was named Joseph Harper. And fate was not finished with either of them. Before we begin this story, take a second to subscribe, share this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let us go back to where it all began. Belfast, 1898. The shipyards of Belfast were loud, dangerous, and alive. Massive cranes towered over the water like iron monsters. The sound of steel being hammered echoed through the city from sunrise to nightfall. Sparks flew through the air. Steam hissed. Men shouted over the noise, their voices already rough from years of coal dust and cold wind. This was Harland and Wolff, the heart of the British shipbuilding empire. Ships were born here, ships that carried wealth, power, and people across the oceans. It was also a place where men died quietly and were forgotten quickly. Thomas Andrews walked through these yards every day. He was only 24 years old, but he already carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was the nephew of Lord Peary, the chairman of the company. Privilege followed him everywhere, but Andrews was different. He did not stay in an office. He wore work boots. He climbed inside unfinished hulls. He spoke with riveters and welders. He carried a small leather notebook filled with sketches and notes written in careful handwriting. He believed ships were not just steel and numbers. They carried lives, and mistakes could kill. Most managers watched from a distance. Andrews walked among the men. On a cold spring morning in 1898, Andrews was inspecting a section of scaffolding near the water. The tide was high, the wind was sharp. Below him, the harbor water was dark and restless. What happened next would never appear in official records. A plank shifted. A shout rang out. Andrews lost his footing and fell. He hit the water hard. The shock stole the air from his lungs. His heavy coat dragged him down. The cold seized his body like a fist. He could not swim. He thrashed once, twice, then began to sink. On the dock, men shouted. Some froze. Some ran for ropes. But no one jumped. No one except a boy. Joseph Harper was 11 years old. Small, thin, and quick. He was standing near the water delivering tools when he saw Andrews fall. Joseph could not swim either. He knew that, but he also knew something else. If no one moved, the man would die. Joseph did not think. He ran. He jumped. The water was knives. It burned his skin. It stole his breath. He went under once, panicking, then came back up coughing. Andrews was sinking fast. Joseph grabbed his coat collar with both hands and kicked wildly. He screamed until someone threw a rope. Together, they dragged Andrews out. Joseph collapsed on the dock, shaking violently. Andrews lay coughing, alive. No cheers followed. No applause. Foreman ordered men back to work. The accident was recorded as a minor incident. Harland and Wolff quietly paid Joseph family £50. Enough to keep them silent. Enough to disappear the story. Joseph was promised something else too. When he came of age, there would be work for him aboard company ships. Then everyone moved on, but Joseph never forgot that water. Joseph Harper lived with his father Samuel in a narrow boarding house near the docks. Samuel had been born free in Philadelphia, the son of a man who escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad. After Joseph's mother died, Samuel crossed the Atlantic looking for work and dignity. Belfast offered work, but not kindness. Joseph learned early how to stay invisible. He ran errands. He watched the yards. He learned which men were safe and which were cruel. He learned that accidents were common and justice was rare. He also learned that his life was worth less than others. After the accident, Andrews thanked him once. Just once. Then Andrews returned to his plans and Joseph returned to the streets. Years passed. Joseph grew into a man. He kept his promise and took work at sea. Coal trimmer, deckhand, anything that paid. His body grew strong, his lungs filled with dust and smoke. He crossed oceans and survived storms. Thomas Andrews rose through the company. Bigger ships, greater responsibility, a new project unlike anything the world had seen. Titanic. 14 years after the accident, both men boarded the same ship. One is its designer, one is its worker, bound by water, bound by silence, and when the ocean came for them again, history would ask a terrible question. Did Thomas Andrews remember the boy who saved his life? And if he did, why did he not save him in return? If you want part 2, make sure you are subscribed, share this story, and comment below where you are watching from. Because the deeper we go, the darker this story becomes. Part 2. The screams from the water. Some moments split a life in two. Before and after. This was one of those moments. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from right now. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now listen closely, because on that cold April afternoon in 1898, the water of Belfast Lough was about to claim a life. And only one person was moving fast enough to stop it. Joseph Harper was running. He did not know who the man in the water was. He did not know his name, his position, or his importance. All Joseph knew was the sound. A terrible sound. The sound of someone who knew they were about to die. The small launch had overturned completely. Its dark wooden belly rose and fell with the waves. Two men clung to it desperately, their fingers white with cold. The third man was alone. Every time his head went under, it stayed there a little longer. The water was brutal, April cold, the kind that steals strength in seconds. Men crowded the dock, managers in fine coats, workers in heavy boots. Someone shouted for a rope. Someone else shouted for a boat. But no one jumped. Joseph did not stop to think. He kicked off his worn shoes as he ran. They hit the dock behind him. He reached the edge and leapt. The cold hit him like a wall. It drove the air from his lungs. His chest locked. For a moment he panicked, flailing wildly, his arms slapping uselessly at the surface. The water tasted of salt and oil and iron. It burned his throat. He went under. For one terrifying second everything went dark. Then he came back up gasping. The man was closer now. Joseph could see his face. Pale, eyes wide, hair plastered to his forehead. He was not young, he was heavy, and he was sinking fast. Joseph kicked hard, every movement desperate and untrained. He grabbed at the man's coat but missed. The waves slapped them apart. The man's head went under again. Joseph screamed. He did not know why. Maybe to give himself courage, maybe because fear needed a voice. He lunged again and caught fabric. The coat was thick and soaked. It dragged Joseph down with the man. Panic surged through him. His legs burned. His arms shook. The cold wrapped around his body like chains. He remembered his father's words. Never fight the water. Use it. Joseph wrapped his arm through the man's shoulder and kicked upward. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. He did not know how long he could hold on. The man coughed violently as his head broke the surface. He tried to speak but could not. His eyes locked on Joseph with a look that was almost disbelief. A rope splashed into the water beside them. Hands grabbed. Strong hands. Rough hands. Joseph felt himself being pulled. The dock rose out of the water. The noise grew louder. They hauled the man up first. Then Joseph's hands slipped. For a heartbeat he thought he was going back under for good. Then someone grabbed his arm. Joseph was dragged onto the dock and collapsed. His whole body shook uncontrollably. His teeth chattered so hard they hurt. Water poured from his clothes and pooled beneath him. He curled in on himself, coughing, gasping, trying to breathe. The man he had saved lay nearby, surrounded by others. Someone wrapped a coat around him. Someone else shouted orders. Joseph was forgotten almost immediately. No one asked his name. No one asked if he was hurt. A foreman finally noticed him shivering and cursed. He told Joseph to get out of the way. To go home. to dry off before he caught his death. Joseph stood slowly. His legs felt weak. His fingers were numb and white. He retrieved his shoes and slipped them on with shaking hands. As he turned to leave, he looked back once. The man was sitting up now, coughing into a handkerchief. Someone said his name, Mr. Andrews. Joseph did not know who that was. It meant nothing to him. He walked home dripping wet through the cold streets of Belfast. By the time he reached Corporation Street, the shaking had turned violent. Mrs. Donnelly took one look at him and gasped. She wrapped him in blankets and shoved him near the stove. His father came running, fear written across his face. Joseph tried to tell him what happened, but the words came out broken between shivers. That night, Joseph burned with fever. For 3 days he drifted in and out of sleep. He dreamed of black water pulling him down, of hands slipping away, of cold that would not let go. On the 4th day, a man came to the boarding house. He wore a dark coat. His shoes were polished. He spoke politely, carefully. He said he represented Harland and Wolff. He placed an envelope on the table. £50. More money than Joseph's father had ever seen at once. He said it was compensation for the incident. He said the company appreciated bravery but preferred discretion. Accidents happened. There was no need for stories. Samuel Harper understood immediately. This was not a reward. It was silence. The man added one more thing before he left. When the boy was old enough, there would be work for him aboard company ships. A future. Joseph's father nodded. The man left. Joseph lay in bed listening. He felt proud, confused, and strangely hollow. No one from the shipyard ever came back to ask how he was. No one from the newspapers wrote his name. The story vanished. But Thomas Andrews never forgot the water. From that day forward, something changed in him. He became harder in meetings. Sharper. Less willing to compromise. He argued over steel thickness. Over lifeboats. Over safety features others called unnecessary. At night, he dreamed of sinking ships. And somewhere deep inside him, whether he admitted it or not, lived the memory of a boy with dark eyes and shaking hands who had pulled him from death. 14 years later, the ocean would return to collect its debt. And both of them would be there to pay it. If you want part 3, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Because what followed this rescue would shape the creation of Titanic itself. Part 3. The Price of Silence. Some rescues change history, others are erased. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Now listen carefully, because saving a life does not always bring gratitude. Sometimes it brings fear, and fear always demands silence. Joseph Harper was still weak when his father held him. Samuel's hands were rough and shaking. He had carried coal and steel his whole life, but the thought of losing his son had almost broken him. I was not thinking, Joseph said again. That frightened Samuel more than anything else. Samuel sat on the edge of the cot. He ran a hand over his face and looked around the small medical room. It was clean, too quiet. This was not a place meant for boys like Joseph. Do you know who you saved? Samuel asked quietly. Joseph shook his head. A very important man. Joseph frowned. He did not understand why that mattered. Mrs. Brennan returned with more soup and gave Samuel a look that said he should lower his voice. She left them alone again. Samuel leaned closer. You did a brave thing, he said. But brave things have consequences. Men like the one you saved do not like reminders of how close they came to death. They do not like owing their lives to boys no one notices. Joseph felt a strange cold inside his chest that had nothing to do with the water. Later that afternoon, the door opened again. 2 men entered. One was Lord Peary. Joseph recognized him instantly from the dock. Tall, well-dressed. His face was calm but tight, like a man holding something back. The other man wore a dark suit and carried a leather folder. Samuel stood immediately. Lord Peary raised a hand. Please sit. We are not here to cause trouble. Joseph watched everything. Peary looked at Joseph for a long moment. His eyes were sharp, measuring. You saved my nephew's life, he said. Thomas Andrews is alive because of you. Joseph waited for more words. Praise. Thanks. They did not come. Instead, the man with the folder stepped forward and placed it on the small table. Inside was money. 50 pounds. Samuel's breath caught. Peary spoke again, his voice low and controlled. This was an unfortunate incident. Accidents happen in shipyards. We do not wish for rumors or exaggerated stories. They cause panic, bad publicity, unnecessary attention. Samuel understood instantly. Joseph did not. You are being compensated, Peary continued. Your son's actions were courageous. The company recognizes that. This money will help your family. Samuel clenched his jaw. And the boy future, Peary added. When he is old enough, there will be work for him. A good position aboard our ships. Steady pay. Joseph looked at his father. Samuel's eyes were dark, angry, trapped. Peary leaned down slightly so his face was closer to Joseph. You did well, boy. Very well. But this is not a story to be told. Do you understand? Joseph nodded slowly. Good, Peary said. He turned and left. The door closed softly behind him. The silence afterward was heavy. Samuel sat for a long time staring at the envelope. Finally he spoke. This money is not a gift. Joseph swallowed. It is a warning. Joseph stayed one more night in the medical office. In the morning, Mrs. Brennan helped him dress. His hand was wrapped in fresh bandages where the rope had burned him. It would scar. She walked him to the gate herself. Be careful, she said softly. You have a good heart. The world does not always reward that. Joseph nodded. Outside, Belfast moved on as if nothing had happened. The docks were loud. Men worked. Ships were built. The water looked the same. No one spoke of the accident. No one spoke of Joseph Harper. At home, Samuel hid the money beneath a loose floorboard. He did not spend it. Not yet. Life returned to its hard rhythm. Joseph went back to running errands. Selling papers. Watching ships. But something inside him had changed. He noticed how men avoided his eyes at the dock. How conversations stopped when he approached. How foremen watched him too closely. He learned something important. Heroism made people uncomfortable. Thomas Andrews returned to work within weeks. Joseph saw him often. Andrews walked the yard with his notebook. He spoke to foremen. He inspected steel plates. He argued. But he never spoke to Joseph. Not once. No thank you. No nod. No acknowledgement. At first, Joseph felt hurt. Then he felt angry. Then he felt nothing. Years passed. Joseph grew taller. Stronger. His childhood faded into labor and routine. The promise of work aboard shipyards became real. Coal trimmer. Deckhand. Dirty jobs. Dangerous jobs. He crossed oceans. He saw storms that swallowed ships whole. He watched men fall into water and never come back. And every time, he remembered Belfast Lock. Thomas Andrews rose higher. Bigger ships. More power. More responsibility. He fought harder than ever for safety. Thicker steel. Better designs. More lifeboats. People called him difficult. They did not know he was haunted. At night, Andrews dreamed of cold water closing over his head. Of hands pulling him up. Of a boy face he could not quite remember. 14 years passed. Then came Titanic, the greatest ship ever built. Joseph Harper was assigned to her maiden voyage. Thomas Andrews walked her decks knowing every inch of her steel. 2 lives tied together by silence. By water. By a debt that had never been paid. And when the ocean rose again, there would be no rope. If you want part 4, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Because next, we follow Joseph to sea and into the shadow of Titanic itself. Part 4. The ocean never forgets. Some debts are not written on paper. They are written in water. And the ocean always comes back to collect. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support keeps this story alive. Now let us go forward in time. Because after Belfast, after the silence, after the money hidden under the floorboards, Joseph Harper life moved in only one direction. Toward the sea. Joseph left school early. There was never a choice. Food mattered more than lessons. Survival mattered more than dreams. By the time he was 16, his hands were already scarred, his shoulders strong, his lungs used to smoke and dust. True to Harland and Wolff promise, work came. Not kindness. Not protection. Work. Joseph signed onto merchant ships as a coal trimmer. It was one of the worst jobs on board. Men worked below decks, shoveling coal into roaring furnaces. The heat was unbearable. The air was thick and black. Every breath burned. Men collapsed. Men coughed blood. Men died young. But it paid. And Joseph was good at it. He learned the rhythm of ships. The groan of steel in heavy seas. The sound a hull makes when it is under strain. He learned to read the ocean by instinct. He learned fear. At night, when his shift ended, he would lie in his bunk soaked in sweat and think about Belfast Lock. About the cold. About the rope cutting into his hand. About Thomas Andrews. He did not know why Andrews stayed in his thoughts. Maybe because Andrews never spoke to him. Maybe because silence leaves space for ghosts. Years passed. Joseph crossed the Atlantic more times than he could count. Liverpool, New York, Boston, Halifax. He saw wealth and cruelty in equal measure. He saw how men like him were invisible until they were needed. Or blamed. Sometimes he heard Andrews' name. The designer. The safety man. The one who argued with owners. The one who worried too much. Joseph listened quietly. By 1911, rumors spread through every port. A ship like no other. Bigger than anything ever built. Stronger. Unsinkable. Titanic. Joseph heard her name spoken with awe. With pride. With greed. And when Harland and Wolff offered him a position aboard her maiden voyage, Joseph felt something tighten in his chest. He did not want to go. He could not explain why. The pay was good. The prestige unmatched. A man could make a future from a ship like Titanic. But Joseph remembered water. Still, he said yes. In April 1912, Joseph Harper boarded Titanic in Southampton. She was massive, towering, a floating city of steel and smoke. Crowds gathered just to look at her. People smiled, laughed, took photographs. Joseph walked her decks quietly. He felt small. Below decks, the ship smelled of paint, oil, and new metal. Everything was clean, too clean. The boilers waited like sleeping beasts. And then Joseph saw him. Thomas Andrews. Older now, thinner, lines etched into his face. But unmistakable. He walked with purpose, notebook in hand, inspecting everything. Doors, railings, lifeboats. For a moment, their eyes met. Joseph felt his breath catch. Andrews looked at him. Just for a second, there was something there. Confusion, recognition, or maybe guilt. Then Andrews looked away and kept walking. They never spoke. Titanic left port to cheers and music. Joseph stood near the rail as the shoreline faded. He felt the pull of the ocean beneath him. Deep, cold, endless. Days passed. The voyage was smooth. Calm seas, clear skies. Passengers laughed and dined. Music filled the air. Below decks, men worked. Joseph shoveled coal. Sweat soaked his clothes. His lungs burned. He thought about Belfast. About his father. About promises. On the night of April 14th, the air changed. It was subtle. A stillness. The sea was flat. The cold sharper. Joseph felt it before he heard anything. Then came the jolt. Not a crash. A long tearing shudder. Like the ship had scraped its skin on stone. The engine slowed. Men paused. Silence. Joseph's heart pounded. He knew that sound. Water. Orders came. Confused. Rushed. Joseph climbed upward through the ship. Passengers were gathering. Questions whispered. Then he saw Thomas Andrews again. This time, Andrews' face was pale. He was moving fast. Speaking urgently. Directing crew. His calm was forced. Joseph heard words that turned his blood cold. The ship will sink. Andrews knew. He had always known this was possible. As lifeboats were uncovered, panic spread. Women cried. Men argued. Orders echoed. Joseph looked for Andrews. He found him standing alone for a moment, staring at the water. Joseph wanted to speak. Wanted to say his name. Wanted to ask if Andrews remembered. But before he could move, Andrews turned and went back to work. Helping others. Refusing help. The water rose. Joseph felt it in his boots. Cold creeping upward. The ocean had returned. And this time, there would be no silence. If you want part 5, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Because next, the night turns into terror, and the debt between these two men comes due. Part 5. The night the water rose. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air grows sharp, the silence grows heavy, and deep down, something ancient begins to move. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support helps these stories reach more people. Now let us return to Titanic. April 14, 1912. The sea was calm, too calm. Joseph Harper stood below decks, shovel in hand, when he felt it. A strange vibration passed through the steel beneath his boots. It was not loud, not violent, just wrong, like a long breath being dragged across metal. The engine slowed. Men looked at each other. Then came the order to stop. Coal dust hung in the air. Sweat cooled on Joseph's skin. Somewhere above, passengers were still laughing, unaware that the ship had already been wounded. Joseph climbed toward the upper decks. As he rose, the temperature dropped. The corridors felt tighter, quieter. Crew moved faster now. Faces were serious. Then he saw Thomas Andrews again. Andrews was moving quickly, his notebook gone, his hands empty but restless. He spoke in low urgent tones to officers and stewards. Joseph caught fragments of words. Water. Compartments. Hours not many. Joseph's stomach tightened. He had seen this before. Not on this scale, but he knew the signs. A ship does not forgive wounds below the waterline. Andrews turned and for a brief moment their eyes met again. This time, Andrews did not look away immediately. His gaze lingered. Joseph felt something pass between them. Recognition at last. Or maybe just shared understanding. Two men who knew water too well. Then Andrews spoke sharply to someone else and moved on. The ship tilted slightly, so slight most passengers did not notice. A glass slid across a table. A woman laughed and steadied herself. Below, the ocean was already inside. Joseph felt cold water seep into the lowest levels. It touched his boots. Icy. Familiar. His heart hammered. Memories flooded back. Belfast lock. Knives of cold. A man sinking. Only this time, there was no dock. No rope. No easy rescue. Orders rang out. Lifeboats were being uncovered. Joseph pushed his way upward. The decks were chaos now. Stewards tried to keep order. Passengers argued. Some refused to believe. Others were already crying. The stars above were cruelly beautiful. Bright. Indifferent. Joseph watched lifeboats being lowered. Some went down half full. Space wasted. Lives wasted. He looked for Thomas Andrews again. He found him helping a woman into a boat. Andrews' voice was calm, gentle. He smiled at her, even as his eyes held something heavy and resigned. When the boat lowered away, Andrews stepped back. Joseph moved closer. "Mr. Andrews," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. Andrews turned. For the first time in 14 years, they faced each other fully. "You should get into a boat," Andrews said immediately. His voice was firm, professional, like he was speaking to any crewman. Joseph shook his head. "I know you," Joseph said quietly. Andrews froze. For a heartbeat, the noise around them faded. Andrews' eyes searched Joseph's face. His brow furrowed. "Belfast," Joseph said. "The water." Andrews' face went pale. "The boy," he whispered. Joseph nodded. The silence between them was thick, heavy with years. "I tried to find you," Andrews said. His voice cracked. "They told me not to. They said it was handled." Joseph almost laughed. Almost. Another lifeboat was being lowered nearby. "You saved my life," Andrews said. His eyes were wet now. "I never forgot." Joseph looked past him at the black ocean creeping higher along the deck. "You did not save mine," Joseph said. Andrews flinched. Before he could respond, an officer shouted. More women and children were needed. Andrews straightened. "You must go now," he said. "Please." Joseph looked at the boat. Then at Andrews. "And you?" Andrews shook his head. "There are others." Joseph understood then. This was Andrews' choice. The same man who argued over steel thickness. Who fought for safety? Who knew exactly how this would end? Joseph felt anger rise. Then something else. Acceptance. The water surged higher. It washed over their boots. Cold. Final. Andrews grabbed Joseph's arm. I am sorry, he said. For everything. Joseph met his eyes. I already saved you once, he replied. Andrews swallowed. Then go save yourself, he said. Joseph pulled his arm free. No, he said calmly. I think my part is done. They stood together as chaos roared around them. The ship groaned. Metal screamed. Another lifeboat left. The angle grew steeper. Passengers screamed now, prayed, fought. Joseph felt the ocean pulling. He thought of his father. Of his mother's voice. Of the verse she had read. Greater love hath no man. Andrews placed a hand on the rail. He stared into the water below. Calm at last. Do you believe the ocean remembers us? Joseph asked. Andrews nodded. It remembers everything. The lights flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the ship. Screams filled the night. Titanic final moments had begun. And 2 lives bound by cold water stood waiting for the end. If you want part 6, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Because next, we go into the darkness itself, where the ocean claims what it was owed. Part 6. Into the darkness. Some moments are louder than any noise. Some silences are heavier than any scream. And some waters demand their debt in full. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from right now. Your support helps these stories reach more people. Now, listen closely. The night is long, and the water waits. It was after midnight. Titanic had already struck the iceberg hours earlier, but the ship was still massive, still beautiful, still deadly. The steel groaned as it bent under the weight of water rushing into compartments below. The lights flickered and died in places. Darkness moved through corridors, hallways, cabins, and shafts like a living thing. Joseph Harper moved carefully. Coal dust had been replaced by cold spray and salt. The decks were slick, crowded, chaos everywhere. Passengers shouted, screamed, prayed, fought. The crew ran in all directions, trying to follow orders from officers who themselves were terrified, but Joseph knew the truth. The ship would not survive. He spotted Thomas Andrews again. The architect moved with precision, almost calm in the storm. He guided passengers, ordered crew, but there was no panic in him. Only resolve. Joseph followed. He wanted to help, to stay near the man who had once been a stranger and then became something he could never forget. The water was already waist deep on lower decks. The air was cold and wet. Every step was a struggle. Andrews stopped near a stairwell where women and children were being lowered into a lifeboat. His eyes scanned the chaos. He counted, calculated. Even now, he could not stop thinking. Could not stop planning. Joseph approached, trying to catch his attention. Mr. Andrews, he called. Andrews turned. Recognition flared in his eyes. Joseph's heart hammered. The past and present collided in a heartbeat. Belfast. The icy waters. The rope. The fear. All of it. But there was no time for words. The deck tilted suddenly. A jolt threw people off balance. A lifeboat snapped free. Screams rang out as it descended toward the black waves. Joseph grabbed Andrews' sleeve to steady him. You're going to make it, Joseph whispered, more to himself than to Andrews. Andrews shook his head slightly, eyes fixed on the water. I have to stay. Joseph's stomach dropped. He had expected this, knew it, and yet it hurt more than he thought it would. The ship's angle increased. Water poured over the rails, over their boots. The cold was sharper now, sharper than Belfast ever was. It bit through clothing, through flesh, through resolve. All around, men, women, and children screamed. Some fought, some prayed, some simply froze. Joseph wanted to yell, to tell people to save themselves. But he knew the truth. There were too many, not enough lifeboats, not enough time. Andrews moved again, guiding the last few passengers down a makeshift ramp. He carried himself with dignity, with courage. Joseph felt awe and fear. This was the man who had once been a stranger in cold water and now was standing in the face of death, not trying to save himself but others. The water reached Joseph's knees. Then his waist. His heart pounded in his ears. His hands shook from cold and adrenaline. He thought of Belfast, of his mother's voice, of the verse she had read to him. Greater love hath no man. He understood it now. Andrews finished helping the last passenger. His back was slick with water, his coat plastered to him. He turned. For a brief moment, his eyes met Joseph's. And in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, yes, but also understanding. Forgiveness. Fear. Acceptance. Then Andrews disappeared into the chaos. Joseph ran toward the edge of the deck. He wanted to help. He wanted to grab him. But the ship was listing heavily now. Metal groaned and twisted. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and something worse. Lifeboats were gone. Some capsized. Some drifted away with screaming passengers. The ocean waited below, patient, merciless. Joseph looked out at the black water. He remembered Belfast Lock. The cold, the fear, the rope, and the man he had saved. Now it was different. No rope, no dock, no hands reaching down, only the ocean. Titanic tilted further. The decks became slick, almost vertical. People clung to rails, to each other, to hope. Joseph grabbed a lifeline, trying to stabilize himself. He looked around. He could see faces pale with terror. People screaming, children crying, mothers praying. Then he saw Andrews again. He was near the edge, standing tall despite the tilt. He was giving instructions to a crew member. His voice carried over the chaos, calm but insistent. Joseph wanted to reach him. But the water was rising fast. The ship was sinking. Gravity pulled on everything, everyone. The first screams of metal breaking echoed through the ship. Deck plates twisted. Steam vents hissed. The noise was deafening, unnatural, terrifying. Joseph realized something horrifying. Andrews had done everything he could. Every calculation, every plan, every safety measure. And still this. The ship's final moments were close. The great liner would go down. And both men would be there. Both men would face the cold, the darkness, the water. Joseph's lungs burned. His muscles ached. The water reached his chest. Cold cut through him like knives. He remembered the boy he had been in Belfast, leaping into freezing water to save a life. And now, he was a man, standing on the deck of Titanic, watching history drown. Andrews turned toward him one last time. His eyes held something Joseph could not name. Regret, sadness, gratitude. Then the ship gave a violent shudder. A final groan, a cry of steel, and the darkness took everything. If you want part 7, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Because next, we follow Joseph and Thomas into the icy depths, where survival is not guaranteed and the ocean keeps its promises. Part 7. The Cold Embrace. Some waters remember. Some nights linger long after dawn. And some deaths are not the end. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support helps bring these stories to life. The Titanic tilted further. The great ship's final moments were not dramatic fireworks but a slow, horrifying inevitability. Screams echoed through steel corridors, carried over the water, swallowed by the night. Above deck, chaos reigned. Below deck, darkness and freezing water raced to claim all. Joseph Harper ran. He moved with purpose, ignoring the burning in his lungs, the cold biting through his wet clothes. Every step was a battle against gravity and the ship's tilt. Passengers screamed, fought, and slipped into the Black Sea. Some clung to railings. Others held their children and prayed. Through the confusion, Joseph saw Thomas Andrews. The architect moved methodically, almost detached from fear. He was helping a stewardess guide passengers into a lifeboat, giving instructions in calm, measured tones. His voice was firm, unshakable, even as the deck leaned almost vertical. Joseph's chest tightened. He wanted to call out. To make Andrews notice him. To ask the question that had burned in his mind for 14 years. Did he remember? Would he remember? But the ocean had other plans. Water surged over the deck. It cut through the legs of the passengers like knives. The cold was immediate, biting, unforgiving. Joseph felt it climbing his boots, his knees, his waist. Memories of Belfast Lock returned. He remembered the boy he had been, the rope burning his hands, the frozen water stabbing his chest. Now he was a man, and the water was merciless. Andrews turned suddenly, as if sensing Joseph. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed. A silent acknowledgement of shared history. For a heartbeat, time slowed. The boy and the man, the boy who had once saved a life and the man who had become a symbol of courage, faced each other across a sea of chaos. Then Andrews moved again. Orders to crew. Directions to passengers. A lifeboat tipped dangerously, spilling its frightened occupants. He rushed to steady it, his coat plastered to him, water streaming down his face. Joseph realized something he had known but never fully accepted. There would be no lifeline this time. No rope, no dock, no chance to pull a man from the icy grip of the ocean. He swallowed. The ship groaned. Steel twisted. The sound was terrible, more terrifying than any scream. The decks tilted further. Joseph grabbed a railing, fighting to stay upright, while the water reached higher, pulling at shoes, socks, pants. Every movement was a struggle. Every breath a gift. Andrews continued. Calm, focused, almost serene. Joseph could see the strain behind his eyes, the quiet fear that only someone who understood the sea could feel. He had designed the ship, known its strengths and weaknesses. And now he was powerless to stop it from dying. The night air was filled with screams. Some people were falling into the water. Some were holding desperately to anything that floated. Joseph spotted a mother clutching her child, her face pale, eyes wide. The cold would claim them quickly if they did not move. He wanted to help. He moved closer to Andrews, ready to pull him from danger. But Andrews did not need saving. Not yet. He needed witnesses. He needed hands to guide, to steady, to direct the chaos so that even a few could survive. A sudden jolt sent Joseph sprawling. The deck tilted violently, throwing passengers and crew to the steel. The water rushed in, cold and unrelenting. Joseph scrambled, hands clawing at anything solid. He saw Andrews lift a young man into a lifeboat, steady him, then step back. The man's face turned back for a moment, eyes filled with gratitude and fear. Andrews nodded and pushed him into the boat. Joseph realized then that Andrews was doing exactly what he had once taught him. Sacrifice, courage, action without hesitation. The deck continued to slope. Joseph felt his boots slip. He grabbed Andrews' arm instinctively. Andrews met his eyes. There was no anger, no surprise, just understanding. "We have to move," Joseph whispered. Andrews nodded once. The cold water licked their legs, their chests. The ship groaned and cracked. Joseph thought of Belfast Lock again. The boy he had been, the man he had become. The life he had saved, and the life he could no longer save. Andrews spoke quietly, too quietly for anyone else to hear. He said the words that would echo in Joseph's mind forever. "It is our time." Joseph felt a strange calm. Fear was still there, but beneath it was understanding. Some debts are not settled in words. Some debts are written in water and steel. The ship's stern lifted. The bow plunged into the dark Atlantic. Water surged over the deck, faster now, heavier, colder. Joseph fought to stay upright. He saw Andrews disappear beneath the wave as the angle became extreme. Instinct took over. Joseph reached, grasped, held on to the rail, the edge of the deck. He could see passengers screaming, trying to hold to lifeboats, to railings, to life. He could feel the pull of the ocean, waiting patiently for them all. Andrews reappeared for a moment, struggling to stay upright. Their eyes met again. Recognition, farewell, gratitude, regret, then the final tilt. The ship shuddered. Metal screamed. Water claimed everything. Joseph held on. He breathed. He waited. The ocean had come for them both. And now, the night would reveal who survived and who was claimed. If you want part 8, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Next, we follow Joseph and Andrews into the icy abyss, where courage faces the ultimate test and the ocean takes its full measure. If you want, I can immediately continue with part 8, where the story plunges into the icy depths of Titanic, keeping the suspense and horror alive. Do you want me to do that now? Part 8. The Icy Abyss. Some waters do not forgive. Some nights leave marks on your soul that no dawn can erase. And some debts, written in cold and steel, are never forgotten. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support helps keep these stories alive. The Titanic groaned as the ocean claimed it. The steel bent, twisted, and shrieked under the weight of water flooding its compartments. The night was alive with screams, cries, and the terrifying sound of iron tearing itself apart. Joseph Harper's legs burned from climbing, his lungs ached from cold and exertion, but he moved forward. He had one goal, survival, and he had one hope. Thomas Andrews. He remembered Belfast, the rope, the cold water, the boy who had risked everything to save a man's life. That boy had grown into the man standing now in the chaos of a sinking ship. Joseph had to reach him. The deck tilted almost vertical. Water surged across the steel, icy and merciless. People clung to whatever they could. Some held children, some clung to each other, some simply froze, paralyzed by fear. Joseph grabbed a railing and pulled himself along, inch by inch, toward Andrews. Andrews was near the edge of the deck. His coat was soaked, plastered to his body. He was directing passengers, helping them into collapsible lifeboats, giving orders with precision. Joseph called his name, Mr. Andrews. The voice came out harsh and thin in the cold night air. Andrews turned. Recognition flared in his eyes. He saw Joseph, and for a moment, everything else faded. The chaos, the screams, the water. For a heartbeat, there was only them. Joseph reached him. He grabbed Andrews' arm. Andrews looked at him, and the words Joseph had longed to hear for 14 years came slowly. Joseph. But there was no time. Another tilt. The deck dropped beneath their feet. Water surged up around them, faster now, heavier, relentless. Lifeboats floated past them, some upright, some capsized, some empty. The sound of metal tearing echoed from below. "We have to jump," Joseph shouted. Andrews shook his head. "Not yet. The ship is taking more lives." "I have to." Joseph did not argue. He knew Andrews' mind. He knew the man would stay as long as even one life could be saved. That was his nature. That was the man he had once rescued in Belfast, the man who had spent his life ensuring safety for strangers, even if it cost him everything. The water reached Joseph's waist. The cold stabbed his lungs, his chest, his limbs. He remembered every icy second in Belfast Lock, how it had cut through him, how it had burned and paralyzed him. This was worse. The ocean was bigger, darker, hungrier. Another groan from the ship. The Titanic tilted more. Passengers screamed. Some slipped into the water. Some clung to Andrews, begging for help. Andrews responded. Calm. Precise. Unshakable. Even now, Joseph watched him lift a woman into a collapsible lifeboat. The child in her arms screamed. Andrews comforted her with a quiet, soothing tone. He smiled. It was a human smile, but Joseph could see the exhaustion behind it. The cost of courage. The deck tilted even further. The stern began to rise. Joseph clung to a railing. He looked at Andrews. His eyes met Joseph again. There was something in that gaze. Gratitude, fear, sadness, recognition. It was Belfast, revisited. The water had claimed them both. Not the rope this time. Not a dock, only the ocean and the cold and the truth that survival was no longer guaranteed. Joseph took a deep breath. He looked down at the icy black Atlantic. His mind raced. Remembered his mother's voice. Remembered the verse she had read to him as a boy. Greater love hath no man. Andrews understood. His eyes met Joseph's, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. He nodded slightly. He knew what Joseph meant. And Joseph knew what Andrews would do. The stern lifted. The bow plunged. Metal groaned and twisted. The angle of the deck was terrifying. Joseph could see passengers slipping into the water. Their screams were muffled by the roar of the sea. The ocean was patient. The ocean was merciless. Andrews reached for Joseph. Together, they moved toward the edge. There was no lifeboat, no chance of climbing back onto steel. Only one choice. Jump. The cold hit before the water touched them. It wrapped around them instantly, stabbing their lungs, freezing their blood. Joseph's mind screamed, pain and shock and fear. And yet, he held Andrew's arm. They fell together. The ocean swallowed them. Darkness. Cold. Silence. The ship was gone. Only black water surrounded them. Only the abyss waited. Joseph fought to surface. His lungs burned. His fingers stiffened. He could see Andrews beside him, fighting the same icy grip, struggling to stay alive. Words were impossible. Only actions mattered. They clung together. Joseph remembered every second in Belfast. Every gasp. Every knife of cold. Every desperate moment. It was nothing compared to this. The Atlantic wanted them both, and it would not relent. Hours or minutes passed. Time was meaningless. Every muscle screamed. Every breath burned. The water pulled at them, trying to drag them under. But Joseph held on. Held. Andrews. Held life. Andrews looked at him. No words. Only acknowledgement. Only gratitude. Only survival instinct. Around them, bodies floated. Some alive, some gone. The ocean did not discriminate. Joseph could not stop. He would not stop. The boy who had saved a man in Belfast would not let history repeat without effort. Andrews did not need saving. He knew the risks. He accepted them. But together, they fought the water. Two lives bound by courage, by history, by fate, by the ocean itself. Finally, distant lights appeared. Lifeboats. Collapsible rafts. Shouts carried across the water. Rescue. Perhaps. Maybe. Joseph felt hope. And yet, the cold reminded him of its patience. It would not let go so easily. The abyss waited. The ocean remembered. If you want part 9, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. Next, we reach the final struggle for life in the icy Atlantic, where every second counts, and the debts of courage and fate collide. If you want, I can now immediately create part 9, the final survival struggle before the conclusion, keeping the suspense and horror high. Do you want me to continue with part 9 now? Part 9, the frozen struggle. Some moments stretch like eternity. Some cold cannot be warmed. And some nights decide who lives and who dies. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next part. And tell me in the comments which city or state you are listening from. Your support helps these stories reach more people. The Atlantic was merciless. The cold cut like knives, burning Joseph Harper's lungs and freezing his fingers and toes. Every second in the water was agony, every heartbeat a reminder that survival was impossible without willpower stronger than the ocean itself. Thomas Andrews fought beside him. The man who had once been a stranger, the man Joseph had saved years ago in Belfast Lough, was now facing death together with him. His face was pale, lips blue, eyes wide with focus. He moved with determination, even as the cold tried to take him. Joseph knew he had to keep moving. Every gasp of air brought in a bit of water. Every wave pushed them down, pulled at them, tried to separate them. But Joseph gripped Andrew's arm with all his strength. He would not let go. Not now, not ever. They drifted among the debris of the ship. Pieces of wood, life jackets, and luggage floated around them. Screams and cries filled the night air, mingling with the sound of the waves. Some voices stopped suddenly. Too cold, too much. The Atlantic took them without mercy. Joseph scanned the horizon. Tiny lights bobbed in the distance. Lifeboats. Perhaps a few survivors had been rescued. Perhaps there was hope. He yelled, shouted, waving his arms. Andrews did the same. Their voices were weak, barely carrying, but they were alive. Hours felt like minutes and minutes felt like hours. Every movement was agony. Every breath, a struggle. Joseph's body screamed to give up. His muscles cramped. His fingers refused to grip. But he remembered Belfast. He remembered the rope, the freezing water, the boy he had been who had risked everything to save a man. And now, he was that boy again. Only this time, the man beside him was Thomas Andrews, and the stakes were even higher. He could not fail. The first lifeboat reached them. A few men leaned over, shouting, throwing lines, extending whatever they could. Joseph kicked toward it, dragging Andrews with him. The water was relentless, waves crashing over the deck, threatening to pull them under again. Hands reached. Fingers grabbed. Joseph felt the rope around his arm. Andrews followed. Together they were pulled toward the boat. Every inch was a battle, every second a test. Joseph's body screamed. Frostbite burned his fingers. The cold had seeped deep. His lungs heaved. He felt his strength fading. But he held on. And Andrews held on too. They were lifted into the lifeboat. Someone handed them blankets. Hot tea was poured into cups, bitter and warming. Joseph shivered violently, teeth chattering. He looked at Andrews. The man was exhausted, pale, trembling from the cold. But alive. Joseph sank to his knees, finally letting himself rest. His head swam with memories and adrenaline. He remembered every second in Belfast Lock. Every gasp, every fear, every desperate pull to save a life. He remembered the gratitude in Andrews' eyes. And now he knew, even here, in the freezing Atlantic, that courage could survive the worst. Andrews looked at him. No words were needed. Their shared history, the strange bond forged by bravery and fate, spoke for them both. The boy who had once saved a man, the man who had grown into legend, were together again. Rescue continued through the night. Lifeboats gathered survivors, shouting directions, pulling people from the water. Each life saved was a victory. Each life lost was a reminder of the ocean's power. Joseph and Andrews huddled together, trying to restore warmth, trying to process the horror around them. Joseph thought of Belfast, of his father, of the years that had passed since that cold spring. He realized that fate had a strange sense of balance. The man he had saved once had now survived the impossible alongside him. And yet, so many others had not. He looked at Andrews again. The man had given everything, risked everything for strangers on that doomed ship. Joseph understood now the weight of responsibility, the burden of courage. Andrews had lived his life with the knowledge that human lives were more valuable than steel, more valuable than money, more valuable than pride. Joseph finally spoke, his voice hoarse from the cold. "You saved them. You saved so many." Andrews shook his head, weakly, but firmly. "No, we did it together. You have to remember that." The night continued. Waves rocked the lifeboats. Cold and fatigue pulled at every survivor. Some whispered prayers. Some cried silently. Joseph held Andrews' hand, feeling the tremble of fear, exhaustion, and relief. At dawn, the first hints of light began to pierce the darkness. The icy waters reflected the pale sunrise, and Joseph felt the weight of the night begin to lift. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. Joseph Harper understood that courage was not about glory. It was about action in the face of fear. It was about sacrifice and love, even when the odds were impossible. And he realized, in that moment, why he had been spared in Belfast, and why he had survived the Titanic. Some debts were repaid in full, some bonds were eternal, and some courage was remembered forever. If you want part 10, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are listening from. The final part will reveal the conclusion of Joseph Harper and Thomas Andrews, their legacy, and the haunting question that would linger for generations. If you want, I can now immediately create part 10, the final part, which concludes the story in a gripping, emotional, and haunting way that ties together all the threads of fate, courage, and sacrifice. Do you want me to do that now? Part 10, the final echo. Some stories end in silence. Some nights never forget. And some debts, written in courage and cold water, last forever. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey into history. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. The Atlantic had claimed so many that night. Steel, wood, and human life had become one. In the icy abyss, Joseph Harper and Thomas Andrews were among the few who had fought the ocean and survived the initial chaos. But survival was only part of the story. The lifeboats drifted in the pale morning light. Survivors shivered, wrapped in blankets, murmuring prayers, consoling one another, trying to make sense of the horror they had witnessed. Joseph sat beside Andrews, finally able to see the man who had haunted his thoughts for 14 years not as an architect or a legend but as a human being. Andrews' eyes were tired, haunted, yet there was still a spark of that calm determination Joseph had always remembered. For a moment, the world felt almost peaceful. The screams had faded. Only the soft lap of waves against the lifeboats remained. Joseph looked at him and asked the question that had burned in his heart for decades. "Do you remember, Mr. Andrews? That day in Belfast Lough? The boy who saved you?" Andrews studied him. His lips moved, forming words that Joseph almost did not hear over the waves. I remember." Joseph's chest tightened. Relief. Regret. A strange weight lifted, yet another settled. "Why didn't you save me in return?" The words trembled on his lips, the question he had carried across oceans and years. Andrews shook his head slowly. "You saved me when I could not save myself. That was the debt. That was the balance." He paused, eyes far away. Fate does not always give us the chance to repay in the ways we wish. Sometimes survival is the only answer. Joseph stared at him. 14 years of questions, fears, and what-ifs had led to this moment. The ocean stretched around them, cold, endless, merciless, yet somehow forgiving this one time. They had survived, and in surviving, they had finally understood. Around them, the other lifeboats had gathered. Rescuers were approaching from a distance, carrying blankets, hot water, and food. The survivors in the boats shared their stories quietly, haunted by what they had seen. The Titanic was gone, leaving only memories, debris, and the cold truth of human fragility. Joseph wrapped his arms around himself, shivering despite the blankets. He thought of Belfast, of his father, of the rope that had burned his hands, of the boy who had risked everything for a stranger. He had lived because he acted. And now he had witnessed a man of extraordinary courage, Thomas Andrews, living because Joseph had once acted. Andrews spoke softly. "You have courage in your veins, Joseph. More than you know." He reached out, touching Joseph's arm lightly, a gesture that carried years of unspoken acknowledgement. "The boy who saved me," he said, "you have not forgotten." "Neither have I." The ocean was calm now, almost peaceful. But the horror, the lessons, the sacrifices lingered. Joseph understood that survival was not merely about escaping death but carrying its memory. The memory of those lost, the memory of choices, of bravery, of love in the darkest hours. Rescuers finally arrived. Joseph and Andrews were pulled aboard the ship that would take them to safety, wrapped in blankets, given food, treated for cold and exhaustion. Around them, other survivors clung to life with the same tenacity, each carrying a story of loss, courage, and impossible choices. Joseph looked at Andrews once more. "I always wondered, if I hadn't saved you, would you have survived the Titanic?" Andrews shook his head. "Perhaps not. Perhaps fate had always intended for us to meet again in these waters. The ocean has its ways. It balances accounts we cannot see." Joseph understood. The boy in Belfast and the man on the Titanic were linked forever. Courage had crossed time, geography, and life itself. The debt had been paid, not with gold, not with words, but with action, survival, and the quiet understanding of two lives intertwined. Days later, when Joseph returned to Belfast, he walked past the shipyard. He remembered the smell of coal, the rhythm of hammers, the cold spring when he had first leapt into freezing water to save a stranger. He understood then the meaning of true courage. It was not recognition. It was not fame. It was simply doing what was necessary, even when impossible. Thomas Andrews' family would remember him differently after that night. Not only as a brilliant architect but as a man of integrity, someone who lived his principles even as the world sank around him. Joseph carried the memory too, not as legend but as a personal truth. A reminder that bravery can come from the smallest hands, that fate has a strange way of weaving lives together, and that human compassion can survive even the coldest waters. As the years passed, Joseph Harper never forgot that night. He told no one initially, for the world was not ready to hear how a boy saved the man who would save many, only to be brought together again in the ocean's cold embrace. He kept journals, notes, sketches, and memories, just as Thomas Andrews had kept his own secret fears and reflections. The Atlantic remained eternal, vast, unforgiving, and yet, it had given two men a chance to understand, to survive, to witness the rare, fleeting moments when courage, fate, and love converged in ways impossible to predict. Joseph often thought of that first rescue, the cold water, and the rope that had burned his hands. He realized it was a pattern, a lesson, a cycle. Courage begets courage. Life begets life. And even in horror, in history, in the deepest darkness, the human spirit finds a way to survive, to remember, and to honor those who gave everything. Andrew's final journals, discovered decades later by his granddaughter, revealed the haunting question he carried to the end: did he remember the boy who saved him? And in those last moments, floating in the Atlantic, he did. He remembered. He remembered everything. Some debts are eternal. Some courage is immortal. Some waters never forgive, yet some hearts never forget. Joseph Harper and Thomas Andrews survived, bound forever by the ocean, by history, and by the rare understanding that true bravery is never measured by life alone but by the acts that define it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and comment below where you are watching from. Your support helps bring history and courage to life.